So there's one big misconception when it comes to the avoidant, anxious attachment styles. As you know, they kind of come together. They're kind of known as the things that draw each other together, the avoidant and the anxious person. But the reality is that all insecure attachment is avoidant. And there's actually one hidden dynamic that everyone who's in this situation is completely oblivious to. And this dynamic taints the avoidance perspective. And I want to explain to you how and why that works that way so that you can have some clarity and some insight into what you can do to change that, regardless of which side of the equation that you might find yourself on. So be sure to stick around to the end, because that's when I'm going to give you this really hidden gem that most people have no idea even exists. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a Certified Master Hypnotist and a relationship coach. So I'm glad you're here joining us today if you're new. So let's dive into this. Okay, the avoidant will choose someone who is avoidant in a different way than they are. So imagine you've got a dismissive avoidant or avoidant attachment style that really avoids deep connection and deep vulnerability. And let's say they choose someone to marry that is sexually avoidant. And so they end up avoiding in these two different ways. There's also the avoidant who is with the codependent. The codependent avoids their own feelings. They avoid what's going on inside themselves so that their focus is external, trying to manage everyone else's emotions and feelings and behaviors. And so they're avoiding what's going on inside themselves, which keeps them in a self-betrayal pattern. So what's actually happening is the avoidant is choosing someone who doesn't make them grow. And sometimes even the anxious person is choosing the person who doesn't make them grow, who doesn't push them in the areas that they aren't comfortable. And so when this happens, the avoidant might be with someone, let's say, for example, an over-functioning person. Okay? Now, the over-functioning person, this person doesn't need them. They're capable of handling things on their own, but they also probably have some codependent tendencies, and so they allow that other person to call the shots on things that are important. They don't push back. That over-functioning person, we think over-functioning is like, we can do it all, but over-functioning oftentimes means over-explaining, carrying emotional labor. And so they don't make their partner do their own emotional labor. They figure out all the stuff for them, lay it out for them, and over-explain it to them so that they don't have to do any of their own legwork, which creates an enabler dynamic. Now, the enabler is someone who is competent and capable, but they are over-functioning because they are keeping track of everything for life, all of the holidays, all of the plans, all the do's and don'ts. They are carrying more than their fair share of the weight. And because they're doing that and they're not willing to let go of it, then they're over-functioning and they're enabling that person to not grow and to not change and to not look inside themselves as to where they're not functioning as an adult. And so when that happens, they're allowing the other person to stay stuck, just the same way that an enabler allows, a drug addict to stay in that same place. They keep giving them money for the drugs. And so they aren't making them feel the pain that they need to feel to create the change. So an over-functioning person does that a lot, and mostly because they don't have any awareness of what's going on inside of themselves. And so you need to realize that there is a big difference between secure attachment and committed attachment. Someone might say, I'm really securely attached because I know I can commit for decades and decades, if not a lifetime. But what they're committing to is staying in a pattern of avoidance or anxiousness or over-functioning. And because it's offset by the other person kind of avoiding in a different way, they stay committed. They just stay. They continue to betray themselves. So staying doesn't equal secure. Just because you're committed to stay doesn't mean you're securely attached. Secure attachment behaves differently than just standalone commitment, if that makes sense. Now let's look at a practical example of how an avoidant might be doing this whole process with someone who's avoiding in another area. So if the avoidant is sort of over functioning by doing things, let's say they put a high value on acts of service. They are doing things around the house. They are doing things for their partner. They are taking care of the car. They are, checking all these things off of their list. And let's say they're married to someone who avoids sexual intimacy. Now, the no-sex person might want deep connection, but they can't get it, or they don't even know that that's what they want. There's something missing. But they're avoiding depth and connection by keeping the distance between that other person sexually. Now, they might be shut down to their own needs. They might not even be able to express them. They might not even have awareness about them. So what's happening on both sides is avoiding connection and vulnerability. But there is this unknown secret of what happens when this dynamic repeats itself over and over. And I'm going to tell you in a second, because this is the most overlooked thing in this dynamic. So first, let's look at why this is happening and the root cause of all of this. Now, of course, if you know anything about attachment style, then you know that it's the style of attachment that's formed when you're very young with your caregivers, with your parents. And so during that time, you're actually in a hypnotic state from birth to age 7. You're in the theta brainwave state. So you are assigning meaning to everything that happens to you or doesn't happen to you. Even the pain of not getting your needs met creates an experience that you assign meaning to. And so it creates beliefs that get programmed into the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is driving over 95% of everything you think, feel, and do. So it is the powerhouse of your life. It's running the show. And so you really need to ask yourself what feels comfortable and normal to you, where it came from, what it's about, and why it started. Because the reality is there are probably experiences that have created these protective functions in you that have made you either avoid intimacy or connection, or even be anxious in your attachment over pleasing someone else to get their approval and love, and self-betraying. So the real problem here is your subconscious programming and all the triggers and the fears that it's created over time that have become a way of being that just feel normal to you. And it's all keeping you stuck. It's keeping you stuck in these same patterns. So you can leave a relationship, but that next relationship that you get into, if you haven't healed these things, it's going to show up, maybe even in a new and different way. And that kind of leads me to what I want to talk about here. The focus of you thinking you need what you don't have in the moment. And in a different relationship, in a different dynamic, that focus shifts because different needs are met or not being met. And so we need to start seeing ourselves as part of sort of a sliding scale that's being controlled by our subconscious programming and our own inner fears of rejection. So here's the hidden part that avoidants do not realize, and actually anxious people don't realize it either. They think they are the victim in their mind. And here's why. They think that they're anxious in a committed relationship. Let's say you're dealing with an avoidant, but if they're in an actual committed relationship, like a marriage or, really all in on something, then they think they become anxious. And it's because they do. They are. They think that their actions are racking up points because they're always trying to earn the continual connection, approval, desire from the other person by behaving in a certain way. So they're doing things like acts of service maybe just to try to stay in the good graces because their anxiety kicks in. And this is how the codependent person does things as well, being enabling and overfunctioning because they think that if they don't, they're going to lose the affection or love of their partner. And they're not thinking this consciously. This is old subconscious programming. All of this performative behavior isn't getting them what they want. but they're absolutely clueless about what the other person actually needs. And they're not dialed into the ability to have that deep connection with themselves or someone else. And so even if the other person can express what they need and what they're looking for, oftentimes the avoidant person feels like they're speaking another language. They don't know what that person is really saying or meaning or asking. And they get to this old narrative that says, I'm just not good enough. I'll never be enough. They'll always want more from me. I can never satisfy anyone. And it's an old programming. So they're growing in their resentment, doing the same things, and nothing changes. And this resentment becomes so big in their minds. So if this has ever happened in their life before, then they become terrified of commitment even more so because it makes them anxious. The avoidant is terrified of commitment because real commitment makes them anxious, and it keeps them feeling like they are just running on a hamster wheel, having to be performative over and over and over and over. And what this dynamic tells them inside their mind is that they are the victim, they are the anxious one, or they are the securely attached one, because they are the one that committed, that kept trying and trying and trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, and nothing changed. And so they actually think they're the victim. They actually think they are either anxiously attached or secure attached, and the other person is the bad guy. They don't have the awareness that their own avoidance of their own feelings and their own avoidance of deep connection is playing a part in this. They don't even realize that they're self-protecting in this way. This is just sort of the way they've always been. And that is the problem. They don't have the awareness. So even if you do have the awareness, you're with someone who has this issue, you really can't get through to them unless they are willing to be self-reflective and start seeing their own patterns. But that also means you need to see your patterns. Where are you self-betraying? Where are you jumping through hoops? Where are you doing things that are maybe not healthy in that dynamic? And we want to remember that intermittent reinforcement creates a trauma bond. So unpredictable behavior can create a trauma bond, and then that trauma bond can really make you think that you need this person, like an addiction almost. And in reality, it can take someone who is fairly securely attached, and it can move them on that spectrum. It's that sliding scale where they can move from secure attachment to insecure attachment, because now everything in life is so unpredictable. And that's really what happens when you're with someone who's narcissistic as well. The trauma bond creates this dynamic where you might have gone insecure and then you feeling secure, and you came out of that relationship very insecure because of intermittent reinforcement, because unpredictable behavior. And the thing is, when you go into those relationships, there's a lot of love bombing that happens. And so because of that, you aren't pushed to stand in your authenticity and say things that matter to you, or push back or say no, because initially everything that's coming at you is something that feels good. It's something you want. And so it keeps you from being in your authenticity until that dynamic switches and you see the reality and you're so confused. So that is something that you want to keep in mind, right? There are these things that can kind of hack your brain into putting you in a bad situation that you might not otherwise be in. But overall, keep in mind that the dismissive avoidant really doesn't have any idea that they are avoidant typically. They might know they take a long time to attach. They might know there's some things, but they don't really know that they're avoidant, because it's like speaking a different language. And they've probably been with people who are avoidant in other ways and have kept them from seeing that truth about themselves, or have kept them in the victim mentality, thinking they were the ones that got wronged, and not seeing how the blame lands in both sides, or even being able to recognize the dysfunction. So let's talk about how to fix this. So I'm going to give you a few DIY steps for yourself today. First, of course, you could do the subconscious work. The deep hypnotherapy work and subconscious reprogramming is the fastest way to get there. But the way you can do this on your own is you can start paying attention to your own feelings. Every single day, this is important. You need to ask yourself what you're feeling and what you need. What did I feel today? You might have felt lots of things. You can pick one thing. What did I need today? You might be confused about what you need because you go, well, I have everything I need. I've got food on the table and a roof over my head. What else do I need? Well, you got to go deeper. What would have really helped me feel better today? That's a need. Did I need a hug? Did I need connection? Did I need some space and time on my own? Did I need some rest? Did I need some, sunshine? There's a lot of needs we don't realize are happening because we're not tuned in to what's going on inside of ourselves. So start doing this every day. If you just wait until something big happens, you're not going to have any insight as to what your regular needs are. You need to do it every single day because the repetition of that creates awareness and shows you patterns over time so that you can actually get a better understanding about what's going on inside of you. That is super important. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to start sharing those feelings and those needs with other people. This teaches your brain that it's safe to share, that it's safe to be vulnerable, that it's safe to ask for help, that it's safe to rely on someone else and to let them in. But you have to push yourself to do that because it's not going to come natural to you. Whether you're avoidant or anxious, you're probably trying to control everything else outside of yourself so that you can feel good instead of focusing on yourself and really getting to the point where you are willing to step out of that little comfort zone and express the real you to the world. Because when you do that, you start teaching your brain, but also you start realizing other people aren't as unsafe as you think they are. It's not about their reaction to your request. It's about you doing the work of being authentic and vulnerable. That's where the work is. Who cares if the other person you ask something of says yes or no? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you asked. And getting you to the place where you really feel confident and you feel self-assured and you're ready to enter the world in a whole new way is exactly what I do for my clients. I do this through a custom process that I call the subconscious solution. This gets your brain to reframe these things subconsciously in a rapid way to create the change that you want to have in your life. So if you'd like to learn more about that, check out the link in the description below. You can set up a completely complimentary consultation call so you can get some clarity and I can give you my best recommendations. And if this content resonates with you, I would really appreciate it if you would click like and subscribe so you can be notified every time I post a new video. And I love to know what you'd like to hear about. So if there are topics that you'd like me to cover, put them in the comments, let me know. I'd love to know what you'd like to hear about so that I can help you reach your goals. So until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.